Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, I did want to say in this video that the second part of that statement is actually a paraphrase of what the word actually says. So 1 Corinthians 13:9, which is the second part of that statement, says, "But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away." Um, and so actually, I'm just doing a paraphrase. We know that the perfect is Jesus. Jesus is the Word, and He is going to come and explain the shadows and the mysteries in God's Word to us when He returns. And so then this partial prophesying that we do is going to be done away with. Um, um, because then we'll have Jesus that explains everything fully. So that's what's going on there. I wanted to bring that up this time. So today my video is called July Events, Return of the Two Witnesses and the Dragon. Now, if you're like me, you're like, what is going on? This has been quite the month. I mean, things have been going at the speed of light. I mean, it's like the world changes in 24 hours. You're like, um, you wake up the next morning and the world's completely different. I mean, it's just been a crazy month. Um, so let's talk about it. So what I really think the reason why things are happening so fast is I believe the birth pangs are accelerating. Okay. Um, and so the Bible talks about birth pangs. We read about them in Matthew 24. It says, you will be hearing. Okay, so this is what Jesus says when he's talking about when the disciples asked Jesus what the world's going to be like, before his return, so that they knew what to look for, to know when Jesus was going to come back. And so Matthew 24 is a really good chapter, to where Jesus told us what to look for in the last days. Okay, and so a couple verses from there, 6 through 8, he says, "You'll be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs." So he was talking about the beginning of birth pangs in his chapter. And, so we've already seen this happening, but I believe we're near the end of the birth pangs. And that's why when a woman is given birth, the birth pangs come faster and faster at the end. And so that's why I think it feels like life right now is just, like someone hit the gas pedal, and we're just cruising really quickly. Things are happening really fast. And um, and what I believe, I mean, a lot of people talk about who's this woman and who's she giving birth to, that scripture talks about. I mean, I really think the woman is the church, and she's giving birth to Jesus. I mean, the the birth process was all about us getting ready for the return of Jesus. And then when the birth actually happens, we're going to see Jesus return. Okay. And so we see in the first part of the Bible, there's a couple stories about births that happen to like the three fathers of the faith, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We read about some birth stories from them, and then Judah's daughter-in-law she gives birth to twins. And so I definitely think these birth stories are prophetic shadows of what's going to be happening in the last days. Okay, so then Genesis 25, we read about Rebecca giving birth. Okay, and it says, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, If it is so, why then am I this way? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. When her days to be fulfilled, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. Afterwards his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a peaceful man, living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay, and what I'm really starting to see with a lot of these stories is that I think God is giving us the prophetic timeline in these stories, and so even though in this story, Rebecca is giving birth to twins, we actually see kind of the story about like 4 different people being birthed or coming out. I mean, because we know in Revelation there's the 4 horses. And so I'm starting to see that a lot of the things in Revelation all parallel the 4 horsemen. Like especially like Revelation 12, where we read about there was a woman in heaven, um, with the crown of 12 stars that connects to the white horse. Then we have a great red dragon that connects to the red horse. Then it talks about the woman giving birth to a son who rules with a rod of iron. I think that connects to the black horse with the two. The rider is holding 2 scales, which I definitely think that connects to Trump. He's the rod of iron. The red dragon I think connects to Obama. The white horse, I believe Jesus is the white horse because it talks about Jesus going out conquering and to conquer and to conquering and to conquer. Because what I believe is that the gospel went out around the world before the last days, before Obama came, and before before Christianity died. The gospel got out there, and so Christians were conquering the world, like spiritually, by sharing the gospel. So that would be a picture of Jesus on the white horse. And then the black horse with the rider holding 2 scales, I think connects to the 2 witnesses, which connect to Trump and Netanyahu. And then the last horse, which I think is so funny, is a pale horse, or the horse. I don't know what color the horse is. I think it's a pale horse. And so that connects to, I think it's funny because it connects to Biden, kind of like how he has the like the color of, death, or just pale because he's old. And so that's what I believe. And so that I think when we're looking at prophecies, we could kind of look at these patterns repeated. Okay. So when Rebecca was barren, that would be a picture of the church being barren under the time of Obama, because Christianity really died during the 8 years of Obama. We weren't allowed to say anything. We weren't allowed to share the gospel. The power, any power that we had was taken away during the time of Obama. And so then it says Rebecca, his wife, conceived, but America did birth a child, that ruled with an rod of iron, and that's Trump. So Trump becoming president. Okay. Then it talks about, in verse 22, it says, but the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is so, why then am I this way? And so what we see in America is America is struggling with a strong divide between right and left. Okay, so then Rebecca went to inquire of the Lord. So that would be Christians going to ask God, like, what is going on in the world? Why is there such a strong divide in America? And God's answer is, two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body. And so we have kind of this nation on the right politically and this nation on the left politically, and they're going to be separated from Rebecca. And so Rebecca, kind of in the middle, represents, would represent Messiah's people, kind of in the middle, like leftover or whatever. And then, like after the birth, then Messiah's people will be left. Okay. And then the Lord, goes on to say, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. I don't know if I'll try to figure that one out right now. And then it says, so it's interesting that verse 24 is the verse where it talks about her days to be delivered were fulfilled, because I think that connects to 2024. Okay. And then behold, there were twins in her womb. Okay. So I definitely think Biden and Trump are like twins, or you could definitely say like the left and the right. And if you really understand how it works politically in our country, the left and the right have gone to kind of the extreme of the extreme, far left, far right. Okay. I mean, the left are always accusing the right of being far right, but the left is also far left. Okay. And so those would be the twins. Okay. And then what I think, like with prophecy, a lot of times when you're reading prophecy, then it backs up again. And so then now it went, in verse 24, it's like we backed up and it said, now the first came forth red all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. So I believe that's a picture of Obama, that he's the red. I think he's actually the red dragon. Okay. Which connects Obama to the the people, what do you call it, Edomites, which would be the I can't think of anybody's name. Sorry about that. I'm forgetting that. It connects to the Arabs, or it connects to the religion that they have. Anyways, so Obama's definitely, he's not, they told us he was a Christian, but he's definitely got that Arab religion, which I can't think of the name of right now. So anyway, so then verse 26, it says afterwards, okay, and a lot of people always say they don't believe that the numbers are inspired, but I think they do, because a lot of times, it just amazes me so many times when I'm trying to look at prophecy. If I look at the numbers, I'm given some clues. Okay. So what we see, verse 26, we see that number 6 there. And actually what's really interesting about that is that July 26th of this year was when we kind of saw the return of Trump and Netanyahu. Okay, so that is fascinating to me. Okay, so what it says is, afterward his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. Okay, so we see that number 6 and 26. And then we see that Isaac was 60. So we see that number 6 there, in the 60. Okay, so I think this is Trump, because of the connection to the number 60. Or, Trump is the 666 guy. He's the sixth king. Okay. Then it says, so I guess I kind of didn't see, So also too, when Jacob is holding on to Esau's heel, that could be a picture of the time of Biden and, Biden's time, because Trump was still hanging around. Like especially when it was time for Biden to become president, it was like Trump was not willing to. I mean, I guess you could see this part about Jacob holding on to Esau's heel could be Jacob trying to prevent Esau from being born. Okay. And so that would be Trump, like with January 6th, they're trying to stop the electoral college vote. Okay. Um, and then it says, okay, so then we'll go on. So, verse 27, when the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. Now that could be okay. So in that verse, we see that number 7 in verse 27. Okay. So Biden was the 7th king. Okay. So in this verse, Esau could connect to Netanyahu. Okay. Netanyahu became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, because Netanyahu, during the time of Biden, he um, presided over the war in Israel. He was responsible for running the war. Okay, as being a skillful hunter. But then we had Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. So we had Biden, who was more concerned about peace than what was good for Israel. Okay, so even before the war started, Biden was running around trying to make these, he was trying to make a Saudi peace deal, um, for Israel, um, but then all throughout this war in Israel, the 9 months of the war, Biden's been, constantly trying to get ceasefires and trying to put a stop to the war. Okay. Um, so that's that part of the verse. And then it says in verse 28, now okay, and see now verse 28, we could be moving into the 8th king, which I think is Trump. So it says, now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game. And so that could be Trump's peeps. Because Trump is like, the 8th king is called the destroyer. Okay. So Trump's going to return to fight against the left. Okay. So he's going to be like, they're going to be like hunters or whatever. And then, but Rebecca, which could be a picture of the church, loved Jacob, which here could be a picture of Messiah. So then the peaceful man living in tents could connect to Messiah, but in a good way. I mean, Messiah is the only one that could actually bring true peace. Okay. And the Jewish people see like living in tents as a picture of like, the tent of study, like studying God's word in the tents. And so that's definitely a picture of Messiah. So the birth pangs are accelerating. Okay. Um, so, so let's do a quick review. I kind of put the key, I mean, there's so much going on, but I kind of wrote the key dates for the last couple of months on this slide. So in April 8th, we had the solar eclipse. April 13th was when Iran attacked Israel. April 17th was when those pro-Palestinian protesters showed up on college campuses. April 26th was when Biden plus 17 other nations were saying, they actually said this to Hamas, which was kind of a miracle. They said, so that was Biden plus 17 nations. They called on Hamas to make a hostage deal. So that was, and so it was interesting because that was the middle of Passover, the 4th day of Passover. And so that was a let my people go moment during Passover. So definitely very interesting. So we see prophecies get fulfilled by different people, okay? And the stories in the Bible just get played out in different time frames, okay? And so the story of the Exodus is being replayed in these last days, except that it's the greater Exodus. So besides, just 10 plagues, there's just a bazillion plagues all over the place, okay? And it's not just one nation, but God's people are in all the different nations. So they're all involved. We're not just talking about the nation of Egypt, like in the original Exodus, but God's people are in all the nations. So these plagues and these different events are happening in all the different nations. Okay, so moving on to May 7th was when Israel finally went into Rafah in Gaza. They they blew their shofars, and that happened 15 days after Passover. On May 8th, Biden withheld weapons from Israel. On May 10th was when, so in April we had the solar eclipse, in May we had the northern lights. Okay, they were seen in much of the United States. Okay. And what was interesting about those is that they happened 22 years, 8 months from 9/11/2001. Okay, which to me stands out because if Trump is the eighth king, I think the Northern Lights are kind of a sign of the eighth king coming. Okay, because 22 is like the eighth day of the festivals on the Jewish calendar. And so that's like saying eight. So definitely a connection to 8. And so what did I write here? So Genesis 7:20, it says the water prevailed 15 cubits higher and the mountains were covered. So why did I say that? So so sometimes I find these verses that connect, but then obviously when I look back, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't remember now. What happened on May 10th? Why did I say Genesis 7:20? Lights. Well, sorry, I don't remember what the connection to that verse is. Unless it's something like, oh, okay. No, I'm not finding it right now. Anyway, sorry about that. Then on May 19th was Pentecost. And then that was the day we saw Raisi died. The president of Iran died in a helicopter crash, so that was kind of interesting. On May 20th, the ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Hamas, like kind of putting them on the same level. Hamas is their terrorist, okay? Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel. So that was not a good thing. On the 24th, the ICJ, they ordered Israel to immediately halt the Rafah offensive, which Israel doesn't, they're not a part of the ICJ, so they could ignore them. I talked about this a little bit more detailed in my last video, I think. On May 30th, that was when Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts. And then that same day, Gantz, so it was interesting that was on IR 22, so kind of like looking ahead to Trump being the eighth king. And then that was when we saw Gantz submitted a bill to dissolve the Knesset. So he's trying to get rid of, he's opposition to Netanyahu. And so he's trying to get rid of Netanyahu. And he's been acting as a Judas type, like going against, even though he up to this point had been working with Netanyahu's government, he all of a sudden started kind of being a pain. So what I think we saw on May 30th is we were seeing kind of a picture of the two witnesses dying. I mean, even though they had died, like quote unquote died the 70th week after the deal of the century, we kind of saw kind of a new death day for them, kind of like they were in the pit up to this point, and now they even went into a lower pit. Okay. And then because what's interesting is that happened the 70th day after Biden's UN resolution. So I think that could be a fulfillment of kind of a connection to the 70 weeks that we find in Daniel, like putting an end to sin kind of thing. Um, so I don't know if I'll say much more about that. On May 31st was Biden did his speech. So he wanted to make some comments about Trump being found guilty. And as usual, he was talking about peace and safety. So that was May. Doesn't that seem like years ago when that happened? So, okay. And then let's do June. So June, I really think, was when the fiery furnace began. Because on June 1st was when the Corral fire started in California. Hezbollah had their series of rockets. And so we saw kind of America started burning up, Israel started burning up. That was the same day on June 1st was when the World Health Organization gave the Palestinians rights. It was also, June 1st is also the start of LGBT Pride Month. So I do talk about that in my last video. So I think that was one of the causes of the fiery furnace in our country. June 2nd, so on June 2nd, Hezbollah rockets caused fires in northern Israel. One good thing that happened in June was on June 8th, the 4 hostages were rescued. And so that was kind of a nice positive thing in the midst of all these negative plagues and fires and war and all that kind of stuff. So that was nice. Even though there's still like 110 hostages approximately left. So then on June 9th, was Gantz actually resigned from the war cabinet. June 12th was the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. June 17th was when the war cabinet dissolved. And I kind of lost track because obviously they still have a war cabinet because just the last couple days they got together to talk about the war, like fighting against Hezbollah. So I guess they got back together. I didn't lost track of what happened. On June 23rd was the Orthodox holiday of Pentecost. On June 25th was 62 years after prayer was taken out of schools in America. And then that's when Israel voted in the draft for ultra Orthodox. I do believe I talked about this in my last video. So that could be the 62 number, the anointed cutoff at 62. So the anointed one is cut off at 62. So I think that could be a significant date. Like now that we're in the 62nd year, I think we can look for Messiah to come back. Then June 27th was the presidential debate in Atlanta. And at the time, we probably didn't know how significant it was, but that was a very significant, history shifted on that because of that debate. And so what was interesting about the presidential debate is it was 4 weeks after Trump was found guilty. It was 3 years after the 70th week on the Hebrew calendar. And so the 70th week was when Netanyahu was out. So 70 week after the deal of the century is what I'm talking about. And that was when Netanyahu was out of the government. And then Trump was kicked off of Facebook and Twitter. And so definitely a very significant time in history. But then now here we at on June 27th, here we're at the 3rd year after this 70th week. And so I think we're seeing a shifting, okay? And so the presidential debate also happened on 10/21 on the Hebrew calendar, which that date's interesting. So it's the 10th month on the Hebrew calendar, the 21st day, which if you followed some of my talking about Back to the Future, that was the date that they went into the future, October 21st. That is also Netanyahu's birthday. Okay. This specific date wasn't his birthday because his birthday is actually October 21st. but it's interesting that the Hebrew dates match up with his birthday. Okay. Um, then okay, so in Genesis 8:14 I wrote, in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. So what we're seeing is Biden being dry. Okay. And so I wondered if this connected to that verse because it was the second month after um, May 8th, which was when, remember, this was when Biden was withheld weapons from Israel. So is he, starting to see judgment because of withholding weapons from Israel? I think so. And then on June 28th, so immediately, right away, immediately, like I don't even, they were fast because the next day in the newspapers there was already opinions, like letters, editorial letters, calling on Biden to step down as the Democrat candidate. So they did not waste any time. And then so that date was 3 years. So that particularly was 3 years after Netanyahu was out as prime minister on the Hebrew calendar. And then it was also the 40th day of the ICC arrest warrant. So those 2 days, the 27th and the 28th together, are really significant. Okay. And so those are 2 dates where it's like, boom, history just did a big flip flop. Things just we went into the debate with things going one way and went out of the debate completely different. And what's the moral? Don't mess with Israel. Okay, basically. So what we're seeing is Biden is suffering some judgment because of how he treated Israel. Okay. And because, like I said, the second month after, May 8th. Okay. So I put these dates together because I thought that was interesting. 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, and 7/8. On April 8th was the solar eclipse. So is God trying to say something? On May 8th was when Biden withheld the weapons from Israel. On June 8th was when 4 hostages were released from Gaza. And then on July 8th, in the early morning, was when Hurricane Beryl, like kind of the first hurricane of the season, hit north of Corpus Christi, Texas, and it was a Cat 1. So I definitely think, the hurricane was a sign. The fact that it hit, and see, it's interesting that it hit north of Corpus Christi because I was kind of wondering with June, like I kind of call June the fiery furnace, like connected to the south because we saw kind of like fires happening in the south. But I've been seeing kind of in the month of July kind of this shift to the north. Okay. Now, what I believe is that Biden, okay, so in the story of Israel, they had a civil war. Okay, this is in the Bible, like in the First Kings and Second Kings or whatever, and that they separated, the 12 tribes separated, and 3 of them kind of went with Judah, the tribe of Judah, and then like the other 10, like and they called them the 10 missing tribes. They went, they became the northern kingdom, and the 3 tribes, which were Judah and Benjamin, they became the southern kingdom. And so the southern kingdom, they actually were supposed to have the rightful rule in Israel. So with the 10 tribes were the ones that were rebellious. Okay. So what I believe is that Biden represents like kind of like the southern tribe because he did have the rightful rule. Okay. And then, so he connects to the southern kingdom. And then Trump and his followers were the rebellious ones. And they didn't want Biden to be president. And so they connect to the northern tribes. Okay. The northern kingdom of Israel. And so I think this plays out in prophecy. And so when you're reading in prophecy about the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom or things happening in the north or things happening in the south, you got to understand the history of Israel. Okay. And so what I think is what we saw in June was like things happening out of the south, okay, and but then it was really interesting at the end of that month was when they had the debate and then Biden was out, because then I think in the month of July we're seeing a shift to the north, okay? And so with Trump and his followers being in the north, we're seeing a shift back to Trump, okay? And then we've seen like the fires in America happening more in the northern parts of the states. Like the big one in California now is in the northern part. The hurricane hit in the north, north of Corpus Christi. Um, and then in Israel, so up to this point, we've seen a big focus on the war that Israel's been having in the south of Israel with Gaza. But then during July, there's been a shift and a focus onto Hezbollah, okay, which is north of Israel, okay. So kind of like we're seeing a shift from the war in the south to the war in the north, okay, especially this last week, okay. Because Hezbollah has just been getting worse and worse, okay. So that's my belief, okay. Um, and then so we saw with March, April, May, June, the Easter, Passover, Pentecost season. Okay. But now in July, I think we're moving out of the Pentecost, Passover, Easter seasons. And then I'm wondering if we're moving into the Sukkot season. Because we're in the 7th month on the Gregorian calendar, and Sukkot, the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, happens in the 7th month, okay. um and so I really think that's true, and so I think what we're seeing is a lot of the patterns in July have to do with people like moving into booths, okay, like building their booth, okay. And so what we were seeing is like we had the RNC, the Republican National Committee, and so what we saw is like Trump's followers moving into the booth of Trump. Okay. And then we had Biden was out, but Harris was coming in. And so then we had like the Democrats are now moving into Harris's tent. Okay. Booth. Um, so just kind of just things like that. And then other reasons why people are in booths. And so that I think the heat wave is causing people to kind of stay home. So that would be in a type of booth. Oh, I think I listed somewhere, I don't know where I put that list, but I had 4 different reasons why people would be in a type of booth. In Israel, what we're seeing is because of Hezbollah, now the people in the north have to really be more aware of being near the bomb shelters. Like the freedom that they've had, all of a sudden they have to be just so much more careful because of Hezbollah. And especially now, Israel's been retaliating because, they had, so on the 27th of July, Hezbollah rockets killed 12 children in, you know, in northern Israel. It was actually in the Golan Heights, which I think is really interesting because the Golan Heights, there's a connection to Trump because he recognized the Golan Heights when he was president. Okay. And so 12 kids were killed, and then there was like 44, maybe even more people injured. It was just terrible. And so now we're seeing Israel retaliate. And so I think they had on the 28th, they retaliated in Lebanon, and then to the 29th yesterday. No, I think that was today, the 30th, July 30th, is Israel actually hit in Beirut because they're trying to go after the leaders of Hezbollah. And so then that makes the people in Israel, so my whole point is that makes the people in northern Israel having to be so much more aware of being near the bomb shelters, because at any minute Hezbollah could retaliate and they could be in grave danger. So that's another booth thing that we're seeing happening. Um, okay, So that brings us to busy July. Okay. There's so much going on this month. Okay. So the first of the month was when the Supreme Court ruled on presidential immunity. So we saw, like, almost within 3 days' time. No, let me think. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, yeah, it was like 3 or 4 days' time. It was like, um, like, I mean, basically, things were coming up Trump and going down for Biden. Okay. Everything was going well for Trump in the month of July, and everything was going really poorly for Biden. Okay. Um, so like I said, kind of that move, that shifting from the Southern Kingdom with Biden to the Northern Kingdom, and God is the one that raises kings and lowers kings. Okay, so I really believe that Biden is suffering judgment from God. And so God's causing this shift from, Biden up to this point had lots and lots of power. But God has now taken that away and is shifting the power like back to Trump and Netanyahu. And then it was interesting too that we had, and then to Harris, and interesting with Obama showing up too. Um, so July 7th would be the date of the ninth month of the war when we moved into the ninth month. July 8th was when we talked about that, Hurricane Beryl hit Texas. July 9th, was when they had, so this is what I said, kind of this focus on Hezbollah. It started out on July 9th. We had a couple was killed by Hezbollah, like parents. It's really sad, they had kids. Killed by Hezbollah in the Golan Heights, Israel. I wonder if that's the right, I might have it wrong saying Golan Heights, but northern Israel, basically. And then on July 13th was when Trump was shot at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. What was interesting about that date, it was 45 days after Trump found guilty. Remember, he's the 45th president. It was 6 months, 6 years, 2 months from Trump moving the embassy. So I think it's interesting that we see that 6 year, 2 months. There's two ways you could look at that. 6 plus 2 add up to 8. So I think what we're seeing is that, like, Trump being shot at the rally was actually a really, like, it's going to end up being really good for Trump, or it's been, like, I don't know how to say this without being offensive or anything, but got like, it's being used to, uh, we'll talk about it on a different slide because I have a quote that explains it well. But um, but what we're seeing is that this shifting of power to Trump, who's going to be the eighth king, kind of started with him being shot at the rally. I mean, just as like the debate was kind of like the downfall of Biden, him being shot was kind of like, Trump being shot was kind of like his return. Okay, the start of his return. Um, it happened on Tammuz 7, which you have that 7-11 there, which is kind of interesting. So that was July 13th. Okay, July 14th was when we moved into, so that was the anniversary of the 2 full years of Biden. I call it 2 full years of Biden messing with Israel, because on July 14th, 2 years ago, we signed a paper with Lapid. Like, that's where we talked about the two-state solution and stuff like that. And so we read about like 2 full years in scripture. And so I think it's important that we're at the end of the 2 full years. Okay. July 15th through the 18th was the RNC. The first date of the RNC, Republican National Committee, was Trump and Vance, were presented as the Republican candidates. Okay, so what's very interesting about that is it happened 8 years. So we see that number 8 after Trump's tweet, say that 10 times fast, about Pence. Okay, so kind of interesting that it's like 8 years after Trump's first campaign. Um, we're moving into, now he's in this, I think this is his third campaign. So 8 years ago it was Trump and Pence, and then now it's Trump and Vance. Okay, which it's interesting. And people talked about like Trump and Pence. You could say Trumpins. Now you could say Trump Vince. So um, but Trump is definitely connected to the trumpets in Scripture. Um, what is very, very, very interesting is that on July 15th is so usually 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar is usually the 9th of Av. Okay, but this year was a leap year. Okay, so this is very fascinating to me, and um, so it's important to keep this in mind that because it was a leap year, there was an extra month kind of thrown in there, and so normally the month of Av is usually the 11th month, but because there's an extra month thrown in there, Tammuz becomes the 11th month instead of the 10th month. Okay, um, and so then 9/11 shows up on the Hebrew calendar during the month of Tammuz. I mean, hopefully you're following this. Like, it'd be easier if you had a Hebrew calendar in front of you. But that and so the 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar ends up being Tammuz 9, which this year was on July 15th. Okay. And so then the 9th of Av is actually going to be 12/9 instead of 11/9 this year. Okay. And so that can be prophetical in the respect that, I mean, usually the 9th of Av is a very sad day for the Jewish people. It's a day of mourning. It's a day that they get nervous about because that was when two temples were destroyed. Um, um, and so it's not a good day on the for the Hebrew calendar. Okay, but I'm wondering, I mean, we could see that maybe this year with the okay, so God talks about in the Bible, God talks about that he's going to turn the mourning days of the Jewish people, the days that they mourn and fast, into happy days. Okay, and so I'm wondering if the fact that the 9th of Av is actually 12/9 instead of 11/9, if that's prophetical. Okay, so instead of it being 9/11, it's 9/12 this year. And so maybe God's going to turn things around before the 9th of Av. Okay. Um, and then, because what I've been trying to figure this out for a really long time is we see 1290 shows up in the book of Daniel, um, in the 12th chapter. Um, and like I had already figured out that 1260 connects to 12666. So we read about the 1260 days in the book of Revelation. Okay. And so that connects to the sixth king. That connects to it connects to Trump. But then it's like, well, what's the deal with the 1290 days? Okay. Well, so it didn't make sense to me until I saw, so 1290 days, you get 12/9 out of that. Okay. And so that would connect to the 9th of Av this year, with Av being the 12th month. Okay, so I thought that was really interesting. Okay. Um, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so it's a possibility that things, so the 9th of Av is August 13th. Okay. So which is interesting that ends up being a month after Trump got shot at his rally. So we'll see what happens before then. Okay. Because really what happens is, okay, so starting July 23rd, there's actually this whole time frame. It's a 3-week time frame that the Jewish people consider it a very just like they take it very seriously, and they don't have They fast during that time. They don't have any weddings or joyful events during that time. They don't have haircuts. They do increase charity and Torah study. And so the 3 weeks go from July 23rd this year, July 23rd to August 13th. Okay. And what they say is that a lot of bad things happened to the Jewish people during this 3 week time frame. Okay. Um, so um, so um, so we could see. I'm trying to think. I mean, we've already seen with Israel getting attacked by Hezbollah, and and children getting killed. We've already seen kind of a really bad thing happen during this time frame. Um, um, so um, so that's the deal. So we could see more bad things happen, but maybe things will wrap up. Maybe Jesus will return before the end of the 3 weeks, like before the ninth of Av. I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see how quickly all these things happen. We'll see how quickly these birth pangs happen, and Jesus gets birth. Okay. Um, so what was I talking about? Okay, so yeah, so that's fascinating to me that really 9/11 ended up being the first day of the RNC when Trump and Vance were presented as the Republican candidates. Because I do think 9/11 is also like a picture of the Civil War. Um, um, I mean, because the actual 9/11 in 2001, we saw like the North Tower. What was it? The South Tower fell, then the North Tower fell. And so we could have already seen the fulfillment of the first part of that with the South Tower falling. We've already seen Biden doing a type of fall, um, and then with the North Tower falling. I mean, hopefully I got this right. Um, we would be seeing the fall of Trump and his followers. Okay, which would then just leave Jesus's people in the middle. Um, so I have it on a later slide, so we could check that. So yeah, 11/9 or 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar. Um, Very interesting. And then on July 17th, that's when Biden had COVID. Okay. That was 10 weeks after he withheld the weapons. Okay. So I'm thinking really fast judgment for Biden. Okay. This is where we see things are really starting to fall for Biden. Okay. Because he has COVID. He has to go back to Rehoboth Beach to take a break. That was actually, I mean, what was interesting about that date is it was the ninth month, the 11th day of the war. So we also see 11/9 or 9/11 on that date. Okay. Um, I mean, I really think we just want to pay attention to 9/11 dates, um, because I think significant things happen on those dates. Okay. So July 17th was 21 days after the debate. Okay, 21 is really significant to me. So, because I think Biden is the seventh king, we definitely want to pay attention to numbers that connect to 7. 21 connects would be like a 777. Okay. Um, and we see like in Genesis, Lamech dies at 777. Okay. Um, and so like we're seeing like the downfall of Biden because on um where'd it go? So on the 21st day after the debate, he gets COVID. Then on the 21st day of July, he ends his reelection campaign. So bad things are happening to Biden on days of 20, days that have 21 in it, which connects to 777. Okay. Okay, then on July 17th was when the Knesset in Israel voted against this idea of the two-state solution. Okay, that was another thing that's kind of going against Biden. Okay, Biden really wants a two-state solution. Okay, so that was really interesting. That happened the same day that Biden got COVID. I mean, things are definitely not looking up for Biden. Okay, um, and so what did I write? Genesis 8:4 says in the seventh month, on the 17th day, so that actually connects to the Gregorian date. The ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat, and so Biden's no longer moving in the ark. He's having a rest on the mountains. Okay. Um. Oh, and then I think Genesis 12:17 connects to this thing too. But I have a slide about that, so we'll talk about that. July 18th was when Trump spoke at the RNC. Okay, see that 18 number connects to 666. Okay, so we're looking for 21s connected to Biden and 18 connected to Trump, or sixes connected to Trump, or 8 connected to Trump. So July 18th also has that 8 number there. Okay. It was 8 years after the RNC the first time around when Trump ran, the very first time when Trump ran for president. Um, it was 3 weeks after the debate. So how does, huh? Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how that works because I got the 21 days after the debate on the 17th. Um, oh, yeah, it would be like 3 weeks if you're just counting the Thursdays. Um, because the debate was on Thursday the 27th, then you have July 4th, July 11th, and then July 18th. So that's how you get the 3 weeks after the debate. So it probably really works out to be like, oh, see, I missed this. It's probably the 22nd date, okay, which connects to that number 8. Okay, yeah, I should have done it that way. Okay, so that's really significant. I think the 3 weeks is significant too, because I think we have 3 years leads us to debate, and then we have 3 weeks that leads us to the RNC and Trump kind of rising again. Because we see in the story of Genesis 40, whenever, when the baker and the cupbearer have their dreams, there's 3 days and 3 more days. Okay, so I think what it really is connects to the 3 years and then 3 more weeks. Okay, um, because what we see on the third day is the cupbearer, now kind of has the cup, which would be like the cup of, I mean, it could stand for the cup of authority. Um, and then the baker ends up, getting hung, so the baker like losing power. So definitely seeing that kind of fulfillment. So okay, let's see. And then what we saw when Trump spoke at the RNC, it was also 1290 days from January 6th. Okay. And then we saw, okay, so I think that's very prophetical because in Daniel 12:11 we read, from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1290 days. Okay, so I think the ALD setup is now Trump kind of like posed to be in power. Okay. Um, um, And I mean, so the regular sacrifice being abolished was they weren't able to do the electoral college vote on uh, January 6th. They had to wait till January 7th, okay, because of what Trump's people did. Okay, so I believe we are seeing the fulfillment of prophecy. If I don't think I put it in here, but if you read about, oh, I think I was going to put it in here, but then I changed my mind at the last minute. In Daniel 11, when you read about the setup for the AOD, the abomination. Okay, so it's 11:31. Okay, it says, forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation. So I think this is a picture of um, Trump and his followers, they arose and desecrated the sanctuary fortress because they made a mess of the Capitol, okay? And then, and like I said, did away with the regular sacrifice. So this is Daniel 11:31, okay? And then they will set up the abomination of desolation, which, I think, um, um, connected to, now we're seeing Trump set up, getting ready to, you know, to lead. Um, okay. So then on July 20th, okay, that was 42 months after January 20th, 21, which was when at noon was Biden's inauguration. So we're seeing, so Biden, I believe, is the beast from the sea and he only gets 42 months, okay? So we're at the end of his um time frame, okay? Like, he is still president, okay, but they call him a lame duck president. But God has taken away his power, okay? Up to this point, God has allowed Biden to really have, unchecked power, okay? But now, I mean, Biden is really on notice with God, okay? He's really kind of making him into a powerless person. Because we saw that with Pharaoh in Egypt, how God was taking away slowly taking away Pharaoh's power. Okay. Um, but then July 21st, could also be 42 months because that's actually 2 years after his first day in office. Okay. Um, and so or did I say 2 years? I mean, 42 months after his first day in office, Biden's first day in office. Okay. So, and that was the day that he ended his reelection campaign. And then he, chose to endorse Harris. Okay. So we're seeing Biden going down, Harris is rising up. Okay. Um, what was interesting on July 21st, that was 2 years after Biden had COVID. Okay, God was judging him for this paper that he signed with Lapid on July 14th, 2022. Exactly 7 days later, he came down with COVID. Okay, so if he read the white writing on the wall back then and repented, he'd be in much better shape. But then we wouldn't have the last days things that get us ready for the coming of the Messiah. So July 21st is also 2 years after um, Biden signed this paper with Lapid on the Hebrew calendar. It's the Hebrew date when that event happened. Um, and so I wrote 777 because we see 21 is, 777. So July 24th was when we saw Netanyahu speaks to Congress. Biden also spoke that night, okay? And in his speech, he said, finish the job, peace and safety. So I really think that Biden's speech didn't have a lot of power behind it. Netanyahu's speech was very powerful. I think Netanyahu said a lot of stuff that was right, um, but not completely. It's he still kind of has that slant about like God's people winning the war with their own power and not really with God's power. He'll say it occasionally, but it just doesn't really permeate in what he says. So that's kind of where he's falls short, is that he doesn't recognize God's power. The need for God's power in fighting our enemies. Okay. But I really think his speech it was definitely a Churchill moment. Okay. And because that's the other thing too. I really think we circle back to a lot of things with history. And so we're seeing kind of like with Netanyahu having a Churchill moment. We're kind of circling back to like World War II, and then with the Olympics too, and then with the athletes, the Jewish athletes, kind of they're not allowed to really say anything at the Olympics. There's kind of a repeat of history where when Hitler was around, uh, they didn't really want Jewish people at the Olympics. So we're always repeating, circling back to things that had happened before. Um, and then I think Netanyahu's speech was a Moses moment, okay? Because God had Moses go up on the mountain and look at the land, so the Israelites had wandered the wilderness, and Moses took him through the wilderness, and then at the end, God had Moses get up on the mountain, um, and Moses was able to see the land that God was about to give him, but Moses was not allowed to go into the land. Um, they switched to a new leader, and that was when they switched to Joshua. So, what I think we're seeing a fulfillment of prophecy, because Netanyahu was talking about kind of like, um, getting the land, having victory, um, he's kind of being prophetical about talking about victory, um, but he doesn't recognize that he's not going to be able to experience it. Um, um, so but God allowed him to kind of go up on the mountain on the 24th, okay? Um, you know, but when it comes time for us to go in the land, he won't be coming with us, okay? What was interesting about July 24th is that's 1 year after the reasonableness bill was voted in. So we see with that number 24, it connects to, it's either 666, 4 times, 6666, or 888, so I think that's really significant. Or it's 12 plus 12. Um, so connections to the sixth king, connections to the eighth king, connections to the two tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, I mean, 2 times. What else did I write? So that was Tammuz 18, which is when the golden calf was destroyed. So I highlighted that 18 number that connects the 666. So like I said, I think there was a lot of things that Netanyahu said that I think people needed to listen to really understand the war in Israel, to understand some truths about the war in Israel. Okay. I think God used his speech in that way. Okay. And so some people's golden calves, like the golden calf of wanting to have peace with Gaza, could be destroyed if they listen to Netanyahu's speech. Okay. If they really understand the truth of what's going on. It's definitely another let my people go type speech. And then it was 3 years, 8 months, 22 days from Trump and Biden's election. Okay, so we see that 8 number and that 22 number again. Okay, so see how we can figure out when an event is prophetical? We look at the numbers. Then on July 26th, okay, so that was a very big day. Trump and Netanyahu were at Mar-a-Lago, so I think we're seeing the return of the two witnesses. So we see that number 26, which is actually, you could parse it out to be 666 plus 8, okay? 18 plus 8, okay? At the rally that Trump had that night, he said he removed his last bandage. So definitely true that we're seeing the return of the two witnesses. Okay. So even the broken Trump is now rising from the ashes, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then that was the day that the Obamas endorsed Harris. So I think on that day, we're seeing the return of the dragon. Okay. Obama being the dragon. It's interesting to happen on the 26th because 26 you could also make it to be 13 plus 13. I definitely saw 13 connected to Obama when he was president. And so seeing two 13s really kind of show you a picture of the return of Obama. So I wrote Revelation 13:1. We read, and the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Okay. It's this date too, July 26th, was 1,000 days, more or less, since Friday, October 29th, 2021, was when uh, in CNN Politics they said Obama returns to the world stage to boost Biden and reassure leaders after 4 years of Trump. Um, so, we really haven't kind of seen, like, Obama's kind of been behind the scenes, and then every so often he pops out on the world stage. And so, but we really haven't seen him for like 1,000 days, okay, since October 2021, okay. Um, so, I mean, because Obama's one of those people is he picks his key moments, okay. He knows when he waited. A bunch of the Democrats endorsed Harris really early in the week, but Biden waited till Friday. Okay. So, um, then we also saw on July 26th, there was a plane crash in Wyoming that killed 7. And 3 of them were from a gospel group. Okay, so that was sad. There was 110 fires in the United States. Okay. I thought that was interesting because that was the 110th day after the solar eclipse. With that 110 number, you could see that number 11, and I think 11 connects to judgment there. Okay. Um, so if you're wondering why we're having fires, it's because we're under judgment. Um, and like I said, fires in the north, a lot of fires in the north. Like Canada's having fires too. It was the Olympics opening ceremony. Okay. And I think the Olympics opening ceremony was the Golden Calf and the Tower of Babel all in one. Okay. It's a picture of the one world religion. I don't think we have to look for the one world religion anymore. We just need to look at the opening ceremony to see it. Okay. It was 9 months, 20 days of war. So that connects us to Ezra 10:9, where it says, So all the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within the 3 days. It was the 9th month, on the 20th of the month. And all the people in the sat in the open square, which that's what happened in the opening ceremony. They were all outside. They sat in the open square before the house of God, trembling because of this matter and the heavy rain. So we definitely saw rain at the opening ceremony. Um, what was interesting too about the opening ceremony is that we saw the rooster on the top of Notre Dame, okay? And they rung the bells of Notre Dame. So that could connect to when the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. So I think it's significant that we're seeing kind of the return of Notre Dame, and that the bells rung. The bells rung 3 times. Okay. And I mean, maybe that's God's way of saying, like, maybe at least 3 different times in the opening ceremony that God was denied. I mean, I know they put up a golden calf. They had the Last Supper thing. I'm not sure I mean, they played the Imagine song by John Lennon. And that song's, the very first line is, Imagine there no heaven. I mean, it's definitely a it's, I mean, that is their theme song. They said it was the theme song for the Olympics. Okay. And so it's definitely this trying to build this world of peace without God, you know. Um, so it's definitely a humanistic religion. It's definitely a religion without God. It's about people coming together. What I thought was very interesting is that they had fires uh, on the trains going into the Olympics. Okay. So I think it was God's way of saying, like, you think you can build this world of peace, but there are terrorists in the world that are going to keep you from doing that. Okay. I mean, just kind of like judging their gods of saying it's just not possible. There's terrorists in the world. Um, um, so I really think we saw the one world religion. I mean, so the thing about the golden calf is that, so in the story of the golden calf, Moses was up on the mountain and they built the golden calf. Like they got tired of waiting for Moses, so they built the golden calf. Then Moses comes down from the mountain and destroys the golden calf. Okay. Um, and then the same thing with the Tower of Babel, like God comes down to see this tower that they built, and then destroys it, like confuses their language. Okay. So I think now that we've seen this golden calf being built, we can expect a Moses type figure to come down from the mountain. I mean, we're already kind of seeing that with Trump and Netanyahu coming down from the mountain. But then, Jesus is definitely going to be the ultimate fulfillment of Moses coming down from the mountain. So then, on July 27th was when the Hezbollah rocket kills 12 children and injures at least 44. They actually shot off 30 rockets. That was exactly 1 month after the debate, because the debate was June 27th. It was 119 days from Easter, 9 months, 11 days from 10/17/23, which was when Israel got kind of became part of this war. That was when when America got their troops got attacked by forces in Syria, or they got attacked in Syria and Iraq, I think. That's the significance of that 10/17 date. So kind of like America again, kind of sort of drafted into this same war that Israel was going through, over in the Middle East. July 28th was when Israel retaliated. July 29th was when they had the funeral for the children. I'm wondering if we're entering into 3 days of mourning for Jews. So then I'm wondering if we're fulfilling, if we're gonna see like a 3 day of mourning for Jews, and then maybe something will happen in America, like on the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd, maybe like 3 days of mourning for Americans, and then and then we'll see what happens on August 2nd. We just gotta wait and see, to see if that's the prophecy that we're fulfilling right now or not. I don't know. The Jewish people are already in this 3 week time frame of mourning. Okay. And then we're also seeing with the last few days of July triple digit temperatures in mid America. So we're definitely kind of mourning and in boost because of these temperatures, but I don't know if something like worse would happen or not. Okay, so Genesis 12:17. So I'm connecting that to July 17th when Biden has COVID. Okay, because it says, it came about when he, Abram, came near to Egypt, that he said to Sarai, his wife, this was before their names were changed, see, now I know that you are a beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that it may go well with you so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you. But then it says the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. So I think this is a prophecy of how, okay, so if you see America as being kind of like the bride of Christ, the groom would be like the nation of Israel, okay? And so what we saw with Biden when he was not willing to send weapons to Israel is that he was kind of putting a divorce between Abram and Sarai, okay? And so we saw that with Abram, he wouldn't tell Pharaoh that Sarah was his wife. He was saying, "Oh no, she's just my sister." Okay. Um, well, because of that, Pharaoh ended up like so he took Sarah in Sarai into his house, and then his house got struck with plagues. Okay. Um, because he wasn't recognizing that Sarah was Abraham's wife. Okay. And so, because Biden made this separation between the United States and Israel, he was now struck with the plague. He was struck with COVID. Okay. Um, so that was on July 17th. So that connects to, this is verse 17. Um, but the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. Okay. I mean, so he got COVID, then he, was asked to step down from the election. Um, so this July 17th was 10 weeks after he withheld the weapons, 9 months, 11 day of war, 21 days after the debate. And I already said it connected to Genesis 8:4 about the ark resting on the mountains. Okay. So that's that slide. Okay. Now, Trump the false prophet. Okay. I think I started talking about this, but this is the slide that I wanted to talk about. Um, so, um, so when we read about the fiery furnace in the book of Daniel, they heated the furnace 7 times. Okay, so 7 could connect to the month of July. Okay, so what we saw was on July 13th is Tammuz 7. So that was the day that Trump got shot. Okay, so what I'm thinking is that the furnace is being heated up. Okay, could be a picture of. Okay, so basically with Trump, we have already had him do all these false signs that make a lot of his followers think he's a messianic type figure. Okay, um, and so they're really following him rather than waiting for Jesus to come back. Okay. I mean, the fact that his followers weren't happy that Biden was president shows that they were caring more about, like, if Jesus is your savior, you don't really care who's president. You just trust God for his will in your life because at some point Jesus is going to come and make things better and that we just have to wait it out until Jesus comes back. And so we're going to have evil rulers, okay, until Jesus comes back. And the other thing too is that we wait for Jesus to come before having this expectation of peace and things going well for us and riches. Okay, that's all promises that God made for the messianic kingdom. They're not promises that God made for our our day, the here and now without Messiah. Okay. Um, we have to wait for the Messiah to come to see all that. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of false prophets that come and say, hey, I'm going to bring you this peace that you're looking for, or the riches that you're looking for, or the land that you're looking for. That this has been going on all throughout history. And so people are willing to sacrifice their relationship with Jesus to follow these false prophets. Okay. Um, I mean, this could be a whole video, basically. I won't go into more, but there's been a lot of false messiahs. Um, like the Jewish people followed some false messiahs and prophets. Um, you know, um, and it got them in trouble. Um, so we saw with the fiery furnace that the okay. So one of the things that I'm thinking is that we're seeing the fulfillment of the fiery furnace on July 13th because we're seeing that things heated up 7 times more. Um, with the fiery furnace, 3 people were thrown into the furnace. Okay. Um, and so Trump got shot, but then 3 other people got shot. Okay. I mean, fortunately, 2 of them survived, but one of them did die. Okay. So we're seeing Trump with 3 men. Okay. Um, and we know in the fiery furnace that the flame of the fire killed the men who carried up the 3. We saw the shooter got killed right away on, like, so judgment came really fast for the shooter on July 13th. Just like the guys that were, throwing Daniel's friends into the fiery furnace, they got their judgment right away. They got killed. Um, what I'm wondering is after, um, okay, so wait, I'll skip to this. We'll come back to it, but I'll skip to this quote in the bottom. So this is from the Washington Post. Came out on 7/16/24. And it says, so this, I thought there was a lot of wisdom in this. Trump's narrow escape from an assassin's bullet has reinvigorated talk among some of his supporters that the thrice married billionaire is a messiah figure anointed by God to save a troubled nation. Okay? Because we even saw Franklin Graham said, God, I believe, protected him. And so we have a lot of people saying that God saved Trump, and so then you got to ask, well, if God's, like a lot of people are saying God picked Trump for, I'm trying to think what that expression is. Like they saved him for some purpose. Well, what purpose did he save him for? You got to ask that question. So what was interesting too was that on the 4th day of the Republican National Committee, when Trump spoke, okay, the theme of that day was called Make America Great Once Again, and they said Trump will usher in a new golden age for America. So see how they are putting up their golden calf, okay? So another golden calf moment, okay? Um so and I kind of think this connects to so the fiery furnace story, I think it's that story, starts out with um let's see if I can find it. Yeah, okay, so it's in Daniel 3. It starts out with Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. Okay, he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay, so the image of gold was 60 by 6. Okay, so a connection to the 666. Okay, because then what happens is there's 6 instruments, and when they hear the 6 instruments, they fall before this golden statue. Okay, um, well, so what I'm wondering is the 6 instruments they could connect to. I mean, I haven't done the counting, but they could connect to 6 false signs that Trump did. Um, I haven't really, done the work to see if that gets fulfilled that way. Um, um, so another golden calf situation. Um, then I'm wondering if after Trump got shot, if we entered into the time frame of the 10 days of testing that we read about in Revelation. So I'm wondering if July 14th to the 23rd was the 10 days of testing. Um, because I think it was the testing of who are you going to follow? Are you going to follow Trump or are you going to wait for Jesus? Okay. Um, because then what happened was on July 24th was when Netanyahu spoke to Congress. Okay, so if we have the 10 days of testing from July 14th to July 23, we saw Daniel in the first chapter of Daniel. We saw that Daniel plus his three friends. See, that could connect to the fiery furnace. You know, 4 men in the fiery furnace was Trump plus the 3 other men shot at the Trump rally. Because what we read about in the fiery furnace, the guy asks, he says, you know, didn't we throw 3 guys into the furnace? And he says, yeah. And he says, well, look, I see 4 men, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Okay. So in that verse, I highlighted the look. Okay, that connects to the 2 witnesses. Okay, whenever you see like look, I highlighted appearance. You know, so appearances and look and vision all connects to the 2 witnesses. And then it's interesting, the 4th is like a son of the gods. Okay, so Trump looks like a Messiah figure to his followers, but he's not. Okay. But we see that Daniel and his friends, they went through 10 days of testing. Okay. It says, please test your servants for 10 days and let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink instead of bread and wine. Okay. Instead of the king's bread and wine. Okay. So instead of Trump's false messianic bread and wine, Daniel and his friends ate vegetables and drank water. Okay, so they're not following the false. They're not following the false Messiah signs of Trump. Okay, and then it says, "Let our appearance be observed in your presence, and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see." Because what we see at the end of the fiery furnace is that the 3 guys are able to come out of the furnace and they're not burnt at all. Okay. So you want to make sure you don't get burnt, being in this fiery furnace with Trump. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so some other ways. Okay, so Trump the false prophet, 666, he's the beast from the earth. In Revelation 13:18, so a lot of people that follow prophecy, they don't read all of Revelation. There's actually 3 beasts in Revelation. There's the dragon, there's the beast from the sea, the beast from the earth. I believe Obama's the dragon, Biden's the beast from the sea, Trump is the beast from the earth. I mean, we have the woman riding the beast too, which could be Harris. Okay. I have a slide about that. So when we're talking about the number 666, God says in Revelation 13:18, calculate the number of the beast. So it's not just going to show up, you're going to need to do some calculations, and that's kind of what I'm good at. Okay. So with Trump, I see a lot of 666 connected to him. Okay. And so, first of all, he was born 6/14/1946. So you got 6, the first 6 is the month he was born. You take the 14 plus the 1 and add that together. 4 plus 1 plus 1 equals 6. And then you have the 6 at the year, 1946. Okay. But then you're left over with 9 plus 4, which add up to 13. Okay. Well, so you have 666 plus 13. Okay, well, so look at the verse number, Revelation 13:18. Okay, so the 666 would be the 18, and you're left over with the number 13. Okay, which connects to that verse. Okay, isn't that fascinating? This is all new. I just found that out like the last couple days. Okay, on 12/6/2017. Which is the Hebrew date of Kislev 18, is when Trump announced that he was going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, like one of his very first signs. Okay, well, maybe becoming president was his first false sign. Okay, um, I mean, this was one of the things that got all these people to think that he was a messianic figure. Okay, so that happened on 12/6/2017. So there's that 12/6, which connects to the 1260 days. But 12/6 is 666. Do you see that? 12 gets parsed out to 6 plus 6, and then you have the 6. It happened on Kislev 18. Well, 18 is always a 666 number. Okay. On 5/14/2018 was when Trump actually moved the embassy. Okay. So, the 5 plus 1 makes 6, the 4 plus 2 makes 6, and then you have that 18. Okay. So it's like 6, it's actually 5 sixes is what it is. Okay. Interesting that happened in the year 2018. Okay. 18. Okay. So Trump was president during 2018. Okay. On 6/16/2019 was when they had Trump Heights, was when Netanyahu gave so silly, he gave Trump a city in Israel, and they called it Trump Heights. Okay. So we see the 6 from the month, the 6 from the 16, and then what did I do here? And then I said 2019, it's 9 plus 1, 9, 10, 11, 12, plus you add the leftover 1 from the 16 date, and then that makes you 13. So that you have your 6 plus your 6 plus your 13. Okay. I think that's how that works. And then 3/11/2020 was when COVID was declared the pandemic. That was 6 weeks plus 2 days after the deal of the century. So there's that 6 number. So I highlighted 11/2020. Okay, because that's 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 is 6. Okay. And then 3/18 was the COVID lockdown. So I highlighted 18, which was also a DAR 22. That was 5780. So a DAR 22 5780 adds up to 666. You also have that 22 number in there, which is kind of a looking ahead to the 8th king. Then January 6, 2021. So with there we see 2 6s, January 6, 6 6. So definitely interesting. And then look at this one, 6/24/2022 was when Roe v. Wade was overturned. That all adds up to 666. That happened at 9:11 a.m. in the morning. And then you got to see this. Okay, this is the latest one. Okay, if you're missing all these signs that show you he's the false prophet, okay, so on the day of his shooting, okay, was 7/13/2024. It's Tammuz 7 or 7/11, which 7/11 adds up to 18. Oh, I missed that. I think earlier I said 7/11 and I didn't notice. I forgot that it adds up to 18. On one of my earlier slides. But then we get the year 24 adds up to 6, and then you take the 13 and the 2. Okay, so 3 plus 2 is 5 plus 1 is 6. Okay, so you get 2 6s there. Okay, so the clock time of his shooting. Okay, so look at that. Everyone says that his shooting happened at 6:11 p.m. If you add the 6 plus the 1 plus the 1, it adds up to 8. Okay, so everyone is looking at, see, this is a false sign because they're all thinking that he connects to Ephesians 6:11. They're all talking about Ephesians 6:11, which talks about putting on the full armor of God, but they're missing it. I think I have that verse on the next slide. News Nation Video so they kind of took the shooting and put the different minutes on there, but for some reason they don't put 6:12 p.m. they have the shooting at 6:11, and then they have Trump being escorted to the limo at 6:13, but they don't put up the 6:12 time. Okay, so look at that 6:12 time. That's a 666 number right there. Okay, what was Trump doing at 6:12 on the day of his shooting? That was when he was lifted up asking for shoes, and he was standing up saying fight, fight, fight. Okay, so a big 666 sign. Okay, and so how I figured this out is I took the News Nation video and I noted the time at, or noted the number at 6:11, and then on the video, and then saw what happened for the during that minute. Okay, and I think that's when he was lifted up. I mean, I'd love to see somebody with the timestamp of 6:12. Okay, but it's so weird how it's kind of like not being put on the videos. Okay, I mean, maybe people are aware of the fact that it looks like 666, and so they're leaving it out. Um, but then it doesn't help people to recognize that Trump's a false prophet. Okay, so here's the Ephesians 6:11. It says, "Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil." I mean, it's funny because they're applying this to Trump, but you should be applying it to yourself, because you should have God's full armor so you will stand against the schemes of the enemy. So all these false signs that Trump is doing are schemes of the enemy, okay, to try to get you to follow Trump instead of waiting for Jesus. Then Ephesians 6:12, which I highlighted that because that's 666, because it says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Um, and then verse 13 says, "Therefore take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm." Okay, so I highlighted the 13 because that connects to July 13th. You definitely need to resist, uh, from not getting uh, delusional on because of what happened on July 13th. Okay. Um, and I mean, Trump getting shot in the air, it is not a head wound, okay? Because it's not a fatal head wound because he didn't die, okay? Um, so, anyways, okay. So then, now, okay, so then I wrote, now we know who the harlot of Babylon is, with Harris rising up. Revelation 17, it's interesting because that was, okay, Revelation 17 is the judgment of Babylon. Okay, so July 17th was when Biden had COVID. Okay, so we're seeing judgment on Biden. Okay, then it says one of the seven, which connects to July, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Okay, so that would be Harris, quote unquote, sitting on Biden. He's the beast of the sea. Okay, many waters. Okay, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. Okay, the kings of the earth would be the power brokers in America who pushed out Biden and brought in Harris. Okay, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, this would be Obama. So Harris is sitting on Obama, the scarlet beast. Okay, who endorsed Kamala on July 26th. And the woman was clothed with purple, scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations. So, I mean, I think kind of in one way, like Biden's abominations just gets passed to her, the cup gets passed to her. But she's like worse than Biden. Okay, and then she has a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality, because she's really strongly pro-choice, for abortion. She wants to, she wants women to be able to kill their babies. Biden's not as strongly pro-choice as she is. And then it says on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So I wrote mother of harlots. Harris is very strongly pro abortion. They want to be able to kill their babies whenever they want so they could sleep around. Okay, mother of harlots, big time. Revelation 17. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Um, so we already saw that, Biden has already fleeced America with all his policies. And so that's being passed to Harris, um, so she's writing on, um, you know, with the she's drinking the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. She's just continuing the sins of Biden, really. When I saw her, I wondered greatly, because it is kind of a wonder to me of why people would want her as president. And the angel said to me, "Why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman, of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the earth, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come." So this verse 8 actually has 2 fulfillments, because so first it started out that Biden and Obama, Obama was president, Biden was vice president, they had a lot of power, but then they kind of like, quote unquote, died and went into the abyss, when Trump became president. So that was the first fatal head wound, is that Obama and Biden lost their power when Trump became president. But God healed, or well, I don't know what if God healed it, but he allowed Biden to return to power, so his fatal head wound was healed. The authority that got killed came back. So then Biden was president. Um, but then now, we're seeing like Trump's fatal, quote unquote, fatal head wound, not because he got shot, that's ridiculous, but that he lost his power, is that now he's returning. The head wound has to do with the authority being, you're either rising in authority or lowering in authority. So we're seeing Biden getting lowered in authority and Trump rising up. But we also saw, kind of like Obama came out of the abyss. Obama seemed to have been gone, and now he came back on Friday to endorse her. So we got that going on. So it says, "The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are people and multitudes and nations and tongues." So now Harris now has all the people that were supporting Biden. Now what's interesting about these people is that they like you as long as you are useful to them, but as soon as you're not useful, you are out. And that's what happened with Biden. He's no longer useful. The beast from the sea is the waters. So I put in these verses from Revelation 13 that talks about the beast from the sea, which is Biden. "Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his head were blasphemous names. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain." It wasn't really slain. I mean, they were still alive, but and then it says, "And his fatal wound was healed." But the authority was healed. So I said, fulfilled twice. Both times Trump gave a fatal wound to their power and authority. But first time it was healed when Biden was elected. Second time when Harris, with Obama's support, rises up in Biden's place. I think I said a third one just in the last couple minutes, but I can't remember now. "And the whole earth," because Trump's quote unquote fatal wound was healed, like he's starting to rise up again in power. "And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast." I mean, a lot of times when you read these verses, there's multiple fulfillments. That's what makes Revelation kind of interesting to read, because it gets fulfilled sometimes multiple times. And then it says, so I wrote verse 18, the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. And I thought this verse was interesting. This could actually be talking about Paris because, Notre Dame stands for Our Lady. Um, and so we saw with the city of Paris, this false religion in the Olympics opening ceremony. Okay. So that there could be talking about um, France. Okay, Paris. Okay. Um, so I thought that was interesting. And then I wanted to point out that, okay, there's two different things, and it took me a while to figure this out. But the great red dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast from the sea has 10 horns and 7 heads. But the dragon has 7 crowns on its head, on the 7 heads, or sorry, yeah, 7 heads. But the beast from the sea has 10 crowns on the 10 horns. Okay. So I wrote that the red dragon, that's Obama the dragon. The 7 crowns could connect to the G7, which rose up. I mean, we definitely saw Obama during his time, really just gathering the nations under his, you know, belief system. I mean, Obama had a lot of power. So we had G7 was definitely like totally on Obama's side, and they were really bummed when he was no longer president. They hated Trump. Okay. And then with Biden being the beast from the sea with the 10 horns and the 7 heads, I talked about 10 crowns could connect to the 9 Arab nations plus the U.S. that want to do a 2-state solution. That Biden had. It also, the 10 horns, I always think of the 10 horns like connecting to like the protesters. So BLM could be the 10 horns. They rose up, during the time of Trump. And then it's interesting because now that we kind of saw Obama return and Trump's returning, it was like we kind of had a taste of BLM returning with this woman that got shot in Illinois. We saw protests kind of rising up for that, so like we're circling around again, it's like we're circling back to the time of Trump. I mean, because, we saw Biden with COVID, we're seeing a BLM type riot. So just interesting how history just circles around all the time. Okay, circles back. Okay, we repeat history all the time. Okay, and the 2 witnesses returning. Okay, May 9th. Okay, the first thing that we saw was on May 9th, which was Ascension Day, which was 40 days after Easter. Netanyahu said Israel is ready to stand alone. And the reason why he said that is because Biden said he would halt shipments of weapons on the previous day. Okay, so I think that was the first time that we're kind of seeing. I mean, Netanyahu's been around since 12/1/22. But but we're kind of seeing a return, like, just he's kind of returning with more power. I mean, now that Biden's kind of like going, like losing power, Netanyahu's kind of rising up a little bit more because he was kind of too much pushed around by Biden. Okay. On June 13th, the Orthodox Ascension Day, we saw Trump in the Capitol campus area for the first time since leaving office. Okay, which was the day 2 years after the Proud Boys charged. So just how we're seeing, on the Ascension days, we're seeing them kind of returning at first. Okay. So we read about the 2 witnesses in Revelation 11:9. It says, so that's a 9/11 number there. Those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in the tomb. Okay, so that was the 3.5 years of Biden. They didn't allow Trump, they still wanted Trump. Okay, we see that really strongly with Trump. It was like they didn't allow him to, get laid in a tomb and disappear into irrelevance or whatever. And then, even when Netanyahu, they still voted him back in. Okay. Um, and then it goes on. Okay. And then it goes on to say, and those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. So the followers of Obama and Biden just had it great when Obama was president. Then they lost that all when Trump was president. And so then when Biden came back, they had the greatest time. And, when it talks about sending gifts to one another, they used America's money, for their agenda. Okay. Um, so that's that verse. And then, but after the 3.5 days, so we're after, Biden's 42 months. Okay. 3.5 days connects to 42 months. Okay. Or 3.5 years of Biden. Okay. The breath of life from God came into him, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who were watching them. Okay. So I highlighted feet because that connects to the feet of the statue. We're moving into the feet of Daniel's statue with the two witnesses returning. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in the cloud, and their enemies watched them. And in that hour there was a great earthquake. A tenth of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. So a great earthquake connects to America. Earth is America. Heaven connects to Israel in scripture prophecy. A tenth of the city fell could connect to the 10 horns, okay, would be the followers of Trump. Okay, so they fell, maybe during this great earthquake. I mean, this is verse 13, so that could connect to Trump, almost getting shot. Then it says 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake. So that 7 number connects to Biden. So I don't know, like Trump rising up, and then 7,000 people getting killed could be a picture of Biden, kind of falling. So that's what's going on in that chapter. So here's that statue that I was talking about. The eighth king does destruction, by the way. So so the statue comes from Daniel 2, and then you combine it with Revelation 17 to know that there's 7 kings. Or, Trump was the 6th king, but then someone returns as the 8th king, which I think is Donald Trump, although it is kind of interesting that we saw Obama too. So that's why I said I think we're down at the feet. And so I got MAGA versus Joe Biden. Or his followers down there. I already talked about this Trump with his 4547. 4547 is a picture of 9/11. Okay. It the solar eclipse connects to the 8th king, which connects to the so that happened on the 29th, which adds up on the Hebrew calendar. The solar eclipse connects to 11, which connects to Trump being the 47th king, number 11. So a connection to the solar eclipse. Okay, so I'm trying to keep a chart of the Passover Exodus connections, but it's just going to be huge. We're in the greater Exodus. I mean, just fulfillments all over the place. So some of the things that I added is with the locust. I saw a video this weekend about dragonflies on the beach. Oh, I don't know where, Rhode Island or something like that. That was definitely a locust type moment. And let's see. And so we already talked about Biden with the 17 nations was a let my people go type thing. It happened on Nissan 18. On June 28th, the Democrats asking Biden to step down is a type of let my people go situation. But Biden was being stubborn, just like Pharaoh in Egypt having a hard heart. Okay, so it took a while for them to get Biden to step down. Okay. Um, on July 18th, okay, so that happened on the 18th. Trump at the RNC is another type of let my people go. Um, his speech kind of thing. Um, and then Netanyahu at Congress on 7/24. That's another type of let my people go speech. That happened on Tammuz 18. So we're kind of seeing the let my people go happens a lot on the 18th date. Um, and so remember that, uh, okay, so we're enslaved in Israel and America right now. Israel, it's you definitely see in Israel. I mean, obviously the hostages are in slavery, but in Israel too, they can't work. Um, they're having to pay attention to the alerts and run into bomb shelters. There's just a lot going on in their lives. The other thing too is they're spending a lot of money in Israel on like the Iron Dome to protect themselves. Um, and they can't work. And this is part of Israel's enemies' plans is to slowly bankrupt that country. Okay, but we've also seen Biden bankrupting our country, taking our money to use for his liberal causes. Like paying, giving it to college students to pay for their loans, things like that. Um, so fleecing us dry. Um, so that's all part of a slavery. God, in the first Exodus, God made a mockery of the Egyptians. Right now, we're going to see God making a mockery of all the different false religions and countries that don't follow him. We saw Biden called an old man. Biden's peer in Israel got ripped apart by sea waves. Iran's attack on Israel was a bust. The presidential debate was a disaster for Biden. And then we're seeing a judgment on the gods of Egypt. Um, the windmills in America were ripped apart by tornadoes like toothpicks. Hamas won't accept the peace plans. Um, peace is definitely a false god of people. I mean, like if you're looking for peace without the Messiah. The fires on the trains of at the Olympics. I don't know if I already mentioned this, but just shows you how peace doesn't work with the actual. I did mention this with terrorists actually living in the world. With Trump's shooting, we saw the issues with DEI. So they have this female. They just had to have a female person in charge of the Secret Service instead of picking someone who had, experience that could actually do this job. Um, so that God is being exposed, false God. The disaster for Biden at the debate. He is an old man. Um, this the software update, like this is another one of those lists that could probably go on and on and on. But the software update that caused outages in the airlines, banks. I mean, they said it affected the world. um, so God definitely judging the gods of, I don't know, technology probably or something. I mean, technology um, can fail you. Um, so wild animals running loose. I added. We had gators were plaguing the swamp in Georgia State Park. A whale jumps on a boat. I heard another whale story just the other day too. So, um, we're definitely seeing wild animals running loose. The diseases I'm continuing to add to that list: salmonella, listeria, the weather events. So in June when I first made it, it was like the nonstop tornadoes. Those are we're not. I don't think we're having tornadoes as much as like it's more like the nonstop fires now and the heat in America. Flooding, hail, wind events. There was a bunch of earthquakes in Texas they had the hurricane hit Texas, volcanoes. Although I haven't heard about volcanoes just yet. Fire, smoke, you know, heat wave, mudslides, the geyser explosion in Yellowstone. There's lots and lots and lots of airplane incidents. And I said whenever God's getting ready to kind of like switch the powers that be, we see a bunch of airplane incidents. So I think God is definitely sending us a message that he is changing, the power brokers need to beware because God is getting ready to switch who's in control. We're seeing a lot of messy car and motorcycle accidents, definitely wars and rumors of war. And then the Holy Week connection. I talked last time about Gantz being a Judas type to Netanyahu, and then we're seeing the Democrats being a Judas type to Biden. Okay, where it says, "Even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." Okay. The other Holy Week connections, we saw the testimony in Trump's trial began on Passover Eve. Okay. The college protests turned into rioting on the first day of Passover, and then the thing that I added was Trump getting shot in the right ear, because we saw in the Holy Week in the Gospels that Peter cuts off a guy's right ear, so we see a connection to the right ear. So we're definitely fulfilling the prophecies of the Holy Week right now. Some of the Shavuot connections. So what we saw is that when, Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, so they had Aaron build a golden calf. Okay. So Jesus did not return on May 19th, which was Pentecost. So what we saw on May 20th was the Pope having a CBS special on global warming. Okay. Then the second time we saw this was Jesus did not return on Shavuot on June 12th. So then on June 13th to the 15th, we saw Biden at the G7 summit with their many gods. Okay. Advancing international peace, security, and prosperity. They were supporting Biden's ceasefire idea for Gaza during that summit. And the fact they call it a summit is really significant too, being up on a mountain. Climate change, they talked about climate change, security agreement for Zelensky and Ukraine. On June 14th, the Pope was at the G7 summit. He's a false prophet. Biden and the other leaders were kissing the Pope, so that was definitely a big, golden calf type incident, the G7 summit. And then Jesus did not return on Orthodox Pentecost on June 23rd. I don't know if we're still waiting the full fulfillment of, well, we're still waiting for Jesus's return. And so he didn't come back on June 23rd, but we saw that on June 28th, the Democrats immediately called on Biden to step down as the Democrat candidate, and Harris replaced him. Because it's interesting that in Exodus 32 it says, "Come, make us a God who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So that could be them saying that about Biden. It's like, okay, we need someone else to go before us because Biden, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. He's just old, So we definitely seen that. And then, Orthodox Pentecost was on June 23rd, and then we saw on July 13th that they were turning Trump into a messianic figure. I mean, I already mentioned how on July 18th, they said Trump was going to usher in a golden age. So golden calf there. Okay, here's the verses that talk about Biden getting times half the time, 42 months, 3.5 years. I already talked about that in another video. So Biden is the beast from the sea with 10 horns, crowns. Um, yeah, this is where I talk about Blinken met with 9 nations in January 2024. Um, so the US plus these 9 nations. Okay, so the 10 horns could connect to 9 Arab nations plus the US, pushing Israel into a two-state solution. Um, and then I had some other ideas, possible fulfillments. Um, so I think I already talked about that. I was trying to come up with, I thought Biden was going to have like 7 times where he said something blasphemous about Israel, but he's really done it so much more. Um, so um, I don't I don't think we're looking for just 7 times. I think it's just that he's if the 7 heads are like connect to the 70 nations or the 7 nations of G7, we're just seeing Biden was, blaspheming Israel in front of the nations. Um, and so the stuff that I added was, so on June 18th, Biden denied that he blocked the weapon shipment. On July 11th, he had his speech after NATO. That's when he blamed Israel for the fact that there's no peace. I think I added something else in the middle somewhere, um, but I'm not sure. But I'll just wait a few minutes and you could pause it and read it on your own. This is the second video. So that's Biden with the blasphemous names. Okay, so I think Biden was the 7th king. I think his menorah is fully lit, or fully unlit, however you want to look at it. So I was making a list of all the things that I think Biden did against Israel. First on 7/14/22. So like I said, 2 full years of Biden doing things against Israel. He signed that paper with Lapid. He did the maritime agreement in October 22, giving away Israel's sea land, gave it to Lebanon. And now Lebanon's bombing Israel, so it doesn't work to give your enemies land. Land for peace doesn't work. So Biden had his Saudi deal on August 9th of last year. 9/11 last year, Biden told Congress about his hostage deal with Iran for 5 American prisoners that also released $6 billion in funds to Iran, via Qatar. I think that was Biden's way of hiding it. It was like through Qatar Qatar, however you say that. So I think it was a way of hiding it. Like he said, well, the funds didn't go to Iran, they went to Qatar. Well, but the idea was so that Iran could still get them. Okay. On February 23rd of this year, the U.S. rejected the settlements in Israel. That happened on Purim Katan. We had the UN resolutions on the 22nd that didn't pass of March, or January, February, March. Yeah. The one on the 25th did pass. And what America like abstained, I think, from voting for that one. And so they were trying to force a ceasefire in Gaza. They allowed it to pass. Washington allowed it to pass. On March 13th, Biden extended another $10 billion waiver for Iran. On May 8th, Biden says that's when he says he'll halt shipments, but he denied it on June 18th. And then, plus all the pressure during the war in Israel he's been doing to try to get him to slow down or do ceasefires or whatever. He's been very annoying. Here's his list of 9/11 connections. There's probably a lot more, but this is what I got. His birthday on the Hebrew calendar is 9/11. He was declared the winner 9 months, 11 days after the deal of the century. He made a hostage deal on 9/11/2023 with Iran. On 11/9/2023, Israel agreed to America's demands for 4-hour pauses in fighting. On 11/24/2023, the Biden administration, as part of orchestrating a ceasefire to get hostages returned, It was announced on 11/21, voted in on 11/22. It started on 11/24, which is Kislev 11, which is 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar, which is Biden's birthday on the Hebrew calendar, and Black Friday, day 49. On 12/12/2023, Biden accused Israel of doing indiscriminate bombing, which was on Kislev 29, which is a type of 9/11 date. 2/8/2024, Biden said that Israel's actions in Gaza are over the top, which was Shabbat 29, so that's 11/29. Oh, so I actually wrote that's an 11/11, not a 9/11. So sorry about that. That's an 11/11. On 7/17, Biden has COVID. He goes to Rehoboth Beach. That's 9 months, 11 days of the war in Israel. Okay. 7/21, Biden drops out of the campaign, endorses Harris. That's 119 days, or the 17th week after the UN resolution on 3/25. I mean, I also list that 17 date because that's the judgment, the first chapter about the judgment on Babylon. Okay. So obviously the first judgment is Biden starting to lose power. Okay, and so I'm wondering if, in Mark it talks about unless the Lord had, let's see, but when you see the abomination of, okay, so in Mark 13 it says, but when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Okay, so the first abomination of desolation, I think, is the start of this war in Israel. But the second one, I think it was Trump at the RNC. Okay, because it's 1290 days. And so I'm wondering, it says, unless the Lord had shortened those days, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect whom he chose, he shortened the days. So I'm wondering if he's planning to shorten the days, even though this war in Israel's been going on. So it's 9 months, like 20, okay, we're 9 months, 24 days, okay, of the war going on. So he might be going to shorten the time of the war with Gaza, but I'm also wondering if he's gonna shorten the time of the war with Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is like 10 times worse than Gaza, than Hamas, is what I heard. And so really, if Israel goes to a war with Hezbollah, a lot more people in Israel could get killed. Okay, so we can pray that God would shorten the days, so that we don't have to live through a war with Hezbollah. And I'm wondering too if God's going to shorten the time of his wrath. Like, a lot of times God's people will cry out to him, and then he will shorten the time of his wrath. Let's see. And then, so shortening the time so Hezbollah won't attack Israel. Turkey said they would join Hezbollah, and I think they said something this weekend too. So that Hezbollah, the war with Hezbollah, does have the potential to turn into a World War III. But I'm wondering how much of that is really like we're kind of getting ready for the war that Jesus actually ends up fighting, and winning. Okay, the war of Armageddon. So I don't know how much wars are fought this side of Jesus's return, or how much of the wars are fought after Jesus's return. And then, and so does God need to shorten the time before Iran or Russia or China attacks Israel or America? I mean, we had, so they kind of downplayed it, but we had Russian and Chinese bombers on the, like, flying over Alaska, and they said, oh, it's no big deal, but we don't. And then Russia too is like starting to stockpile boats and things in Cuba. So like, it looks like Russia maybe is trying to get ready to start maybe invading America, and then China too, maybe. So maybe God would have to shorten the time. Let's hope. Let's pray. May it not be too distant, Lord. Okay, and so I was comparing Trump's DOC with Biden's Saudi deal because key things happen certain weeks. I mean, the main one with the deal of the century was week 70 was when Netanyahu was out and Trump was off of Facebook and Twitter. We saw the seventh week after the deal of the century was the start of the COVID shutdown. Oh, I didn't put in the 6 week was when they declared it a pandemic, pandemic. I guess I didn't put it in because there's nothing that connects the Biden Saudi deal. Um, week 17 of the deal of the century, we saw the BLM rioters. Week 27 was the start of the fiery furnace during Trump's time as president. What was interesting is that was 8420, which is Obama's birthday. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know why sometimes things happen on Obama's birthday. Week 49th was the January 6th riot. Then the next day on January 7th was the Electoral College, and on January 8th was when they kicked Trump off of Twitter. Week 50 was when they had the vote for Trump's second impeachment, and then I already mentioned week 70. So comparing it to Biden's Saudi deal, so Biden's Saudi deal also happens on a 1290 days. So Trump's deal of the century happened 1290 days after the RNC in 2016. Biden's Saudi deal happens 1290 days after the deal of the century. And that was Obama's birthday on the Hebrew calendar. So that was interesting. Week 8 was when the war started in Israel. Week 9 was when American troops were attacked in Syria and Iraq. Week 17 was when Biden mentioned that called Israel doing indiscriminate bombing, even though Israel was really trying to be really precise with their bombing. Week 36 was when we saw the pro-Palestinian protesters show up. Week 42 was when I think the fiery furnace started under Biden, which was June 1st. Week 46, we saw the debate. So we're seeing Biden being pushed out faster than Trump and Netanyahu were pushed out. So week 46 to 49 for Biden, as opposed to week 70 for, well, Netanyahu was out week 70. They were starting to push Trump out in week 49. So some parallels there. So week 46 was the debate. Week 48, Trump was shot. Week 49, Biden had COVID. Trump was at the RNC. Biden dropped out of the campaign. All that in 1 week. Busy week. So like I said, that kind of connects with the January 6th riot electoral, the week 49 after the DOC. And then week 50, we saw Netanyahu at Congress. Trump and Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, and then Hezbollah kills 12 children. So some connections. I hope we don't have to wait till 70 weeks after Biden's Saudi deal. I'm hoping time's shorter now. Like I said, we're seeing Biden out at week 49, so hopefully that's a good sign. So don't go either left or right, you shall observe to do just as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right or to the left. Okay. So there's criminals on both sides of Jesus. Basically, both Biden and Trump were guilty of not protecting America's classified documents. The right wants to think they're righteous, the left wants to think they're righteous, but they're both, there's criminal activity on both sides of the aisle. That's why you want to stay in the middle with Jesus. So I have there's a bunch of prophecies that come from the Back to the Future movie. We saw the 9/11 signs in Back to the Future. And then, is this the one where it talks about, okay, because the Twin Towers fell and were rebuilt to be the One World Trade Center. No, I don't go into details. We saw kind of like a prophetic shadow about Racy, um, connected to a helicopter because it says Racy on the bench in Back to the Future. Um, we see that 1 3 3, and the Marty is the 5 in you know, um, Back to the Future. Um, I'm trying to think if I added anything new. Um, so it was interesting that we saw some things happen on October 21st, which is the future day. It's when they went to the future and Back to the Future. So I thought that was interesting. Um, yeah, because I guess the debate happened on October 21st on the Hebrew calendar, which October 21st is also Netanyahu's birthday. Like in real life, or on the Gregorian calendar, is October 21st. Um, so anyways, so it's interesting. Things, happen on people's birthdays. There's just a lot of it's interesting too that God hid some prophetic shadows in this movie. Um anyways, so I added, so the, out are we out of time? June 2024 was the fiery furnace. I wondered if that's the southern fiery furnace. We see it seemed to continue through July 2024. Is that the northern fiery furnace? Are we out of time? Um, uh, we want to be in the middle with the dry land with Messiah. So see now, my husband was asking me with Biden kind of uh, stepping down and Harris kind of stepping up, if I have to sort of rethink prophecy, and I kind of do, because now I have, how does this fit? you know, see of Biden, I guess I have to change that to see of Harris now. But we want to be in the middle of the dry land with Messiah. Um, so Revelation 16:19 says the great city was split into 3 parts. Okay, so we're seeing that, and it's, you know, you're either on the far right or the far left, or you're in the middle with Jesus. Okay. The cities of the nations fell. We saw Paris falling, Um, so I added 2 to this slide I wrote, Revelation 16:15, where Jesus says, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked and men will not see his shame." Okay, so we want to stay clothed with Messiah. And we read about that in Galatians 3:27. It says, "For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ." So stay clothed with Messiah, okay? You don't want to follow Biden. You don't want to follow Trump. You don't want to follow Obama. You don't want to follow Harris. And you want to, have a healthy respect for Netanyahu, but you don't want to follow him like he's a Messiah figure. He's a fallen human leader, okay? He's a Moses type that doesn't get into the land, like I said before. Okay, so definitely a very busy month. So what can we expect to come? I don't know. So I'm like, it seems like everything's like pretty fulfilled, well, not everything, but I definitely knew Trump was going to be coming back, because I believe Trump's going to be coming back to judge the left. Okay. Um, and so what's interesting is that, I was really hoping things would wrap up in July, but it looks like we might be moving into August, which wouldn't be too surprising that we see the return of the eighth king in the 8th month of 2024. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know if there's kind of this 3-week time frame that we're in the middle of right now, like kind of like 3 Sukkot weeks in July, like maybe either July 14th to the 20th or July 15th to the 21st would be, those are the actual dates of Sukkot. In the Bible, it's the 7th month, the 15th day. Because there's some really, so that week started out with Trump and Vance being the candidates, and then on the 21st was when Biden ended his reelection campaign. So that was really significant. But then if you're following the Hebrew dates from the 15th of Tammuz to the 21st of Tammuz, that would be July 21st to July 27th. I'm not quite sure how the 3 weeks would work out. But if we just do like the 14th to the 20th, the 21st to the 27th, and then the 28th through the August 3rd would be like the third week. We come up with 3 weeks because Noah sends a dove out there 3 different times, 3 different weeks. Okay. And then, like I said too, if we were listening to, okay, like the book of Ruth, she talks about there was 30 days where I was not summoned. Okay, so we have the 30th date. The 30th day after the debate was the 26th. Okay, was when we saw Trump and Netanyahu on Mar-a-Lago. And then you have the Jews fast for 3 days. Let me think. Oh, I think actually I was thinking it was more like the 30th day after. Yeah. So Esther not being summoned for 30 days would relate to them asking Biden to step down. That started on the 28th of June, and so the 30th day takes you to the 27th of July. Then if you have 3 days of Jews fasting and mourning, that would be after they were bombed on the 27th. The 3 days would be the 28th, the 29th, 30th. Then I don't know if on July 31st, if something's going to happen in America to cause Americans to fast and mourn for 3 days, the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd. Then, I don't know if like the Civil War would either start on the evening of August 2nd and continue into August 3rd. Because, one thought I had too, so that was one thought I had because what do we got? August 2nd is Tammuz 27, which would be a type of 9/11 date. That's when we see the earth is dry on the 27th. It's 30 days from July 4th. So that's a possible high watch date. August 1st is kind of a high watch date. Well, not real high, but it's 1335 from 12/6/20. Although nothing really happened on that date, so maybe that's not a high watch date. August 5th is 1335 days from Hanukkah Eve in 2020. Sometimes I wonder if, some August 6th is the 10th month of the war. We have that number 6 there that relates to Trump. Maybe something would happen on that date. But then we have August 8th is 8/8. And then 2024 is 8, adds up to 8. So that would be an 8/8/8. So maybe we'll see something happen on August 8th. And then August 9th, I think, is a significant date because that's 1335 days from 12/14/20. Well, 12/14/20, a lot happened on that day. That was the day of the first vaccines for COVID. That was the middle of the Great American Solar Eclipse, like a middle date in between the two eclipses. That was the Electoral College vote for Biden. Okay. So that's definitely significant. But then, like I said, then we're moving into on August 13th is the 9th of Av. So that's why nobody knows the day or the hour, because you look at the calendar and you're like, well, something could happen on this day, something could happen on that date. So, um, that's why no one knows the day or the hour. So, and I haven't really done all my calculations for all these different dates to see if there's other reasons why they would stand out. But that's what I got on my list right now. Another 1330. Well, another date I'm looking at is August 16th, which would be the 10th month, the 10th day of the war. That the 10th month, the 10th day shows up a lot in scripture. And then the 19th of August is 1335 days from Christmas Eve in 2020. Um, and that's the holiday of love on the Jewish calendar, you know. So that actually could be, like maybe things could be, like I said, things could be maybe wrapped up before Tisha B'Av, and then that could be actually a happy day for us. Or maybe things will wrap up and the holiday of love would be a happy day for us. So sorry that I don't have any more ideas for you, but those are dates that I would look at. Um, so, anyways, but we just saw July. I mean, we're definitely so much closer to the return of Messiah because things are just prophecy is being fulfilled left and right. And we definitely saw things kind of just turn around in July. Okay. So hang in there. I know times are rough. But just hang in there. Jesus is at the door. Stay clothed with Messiah, and God bless. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you.